Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, we're going to stitch a cityscape to use in our slow stitching. You can use just basic stab stitches, a running stitch, a back stitch, chain stitch, any stitch you want. The goal is to create a cityscape, a silhouette of buildings and geometric shapes that make it resemble a city, an urban area where people work and live sky high. You can incorporate landmarks into your cityscape as well, maybe the London Eye, the Statue of Liberty, things like this. They add a little bit of interest to your piece. From here, you can use this in your slow stitching. It can be the main focal point or just a little element on the side. And I think it's adorable. So let's get started. So to get started on our cityscape, you want to start with whatever fabric you like. You can use a quilted piece of fabric, you can use just a regular piece of fabric. I'd suggest some sort of backing, or you can use an embroidery hoop. I'm just going to take this little fabric collage that I have. It's just a bunch of pieces stitched together and right on the back, and you can see how it's stitched. And this just gives me a little canvas to work on. So from here, I want to decide how I want my piece to go. I think I'm going to have it lengthwise with this little piece up top. It's just an abstract design. There's nothing to it in particular. So for my cityscape, I want it to be kind of basic because the beauty is going to be all the stitches. So I'll just create a line here, and this will be where all my buildings sit on. And I'm just using a ruler as a straight edge. As you can see, I didn't really spend a lot of time figuring out if it's perfectly straight. I'll just use whatever my eye sees as straight, and that's good enough for me. If you're very particular about that, by all means, do your math to get that straight. And then I like to choose a bunch of buildings, and I like to make them very simple geometric shapes. So I kind of start just off center, and I'll just make a skyscraper, just a rectangle shape. And then from there, I'll just combine buildings with different shapes. I like to vary the height and kind of just the shape. Again, they're very simple, kind of like building blocks. Maybe two more I'll do, maybe a round dome. And then one more over here, a little rectangle. And then I can just extend that line. I can put something in over here too. I'll do a little building. Now from here you can decide if you want to have a steeple or a post or a flag or anything on top of your building. And you really take it to whatever level you want. I think I'll put like maybe a little steeple here. I'll make this into a church. And maybe on this one I'll have an antenna, maybe 3 antennas just for appearances. And you can also add other things, other structures. You can add bridges, or you can add a modern sculpture. Whatever you want. I just think the simplest is best. I'm going to stitch around the perimeter of all of these shapes. You can use multiple colors. I'm going to use a standard color here, just a solid color. And this is just an off green, almost a brown. I don't have the number, and I don't even know what brand it is, but I had it in my supply stash, so I'm going to use that. And I'm going to stitch a back stitch to get the shape. You can use any stitch you want, but I want it to look like stitches, but I also want it to be very close together. From there, after we have that done, we'll add the little elements of the windows and the doors. And I also like to combine buildings. So actually I should do that first, is I make sure all my buildings sit where I want, and then I just make little areas, which are really buildings in the background. So it really looks like a city scene. So from there, I'll just take my thread with a knot on the back, and I'll start. I'll eventually stitch that line, but I do that last. That helps me to make sure all the buildings sit on that line. So I make my stitch around the perimeter, and then I just follow that line, doing a back stitch each time. And I have my buildings start to appear. Show you how I do that with the first one, and then I'll do the rest off camera. So I like just to go around the building. If I have any ornaments or any odd shapes, I like to do those right away. And my sketch is a guide, so if I want to modify it or elongate it or anything, change it up, it's perfectly acceptable. And now is a good time to do that. So again, I just make these little antennas. And I'm stitching directly over the stitches that I have in that fabric collage. Again, continuing down, meeting all my stitches together. And it gives the appearance of a solid line. Even though the eye sees that it's dashed, it's very easy to follow. So there I have one building done. I like to continue connecting the threads here. So I have this little background building done. And then I'll just continue all the way around. If there are some areas that I stitch the bottom of because it just flows, I'll do that. If not, I'll just stitch all the way around. So I finished stitching the perimeter here, just the outline, and I didn't stitch the bottom just yet. I want to come back and put in the windows and add any other accessories that I might want. Now to do the windows, it's again very rudimentary. You're just going to make little dashes or lines, different ways to make the windows. They don't have to be authentic. You want to give the illusion of the window. I like to use straight lines on occasion, so I'll use little dashes, just little standard dashes, and I try and just keep them evenly spaced because I think it looks like an apartment building with all the little windows that you see. And just the sheer number of them makes it very attractive. Depending on the building, you might want to alter it. So like on this building, because it's kind of a modern shape, maybe I'll make straight lines. And for this one, maybe I'll do 3 lines or 2 lines on the bottom and then a few going across. For the church, maybe I'll do a circle or a French knot in the middle here, doors, and then I can just do a couple of windows. Again, I skip over the little buildings here, the little ones that are spacers. I can go back and add windows or just leave them blank. So for this one, I think I'm going to make a second row here that I'll stitch. And maybe I'll just do some rows of windows like that. And the same thing here, I'll add a few windows. You can add doors if you want. It just gives a different effect. I like to add just a little row of windows on some of these little spacing places, maybe even 2 rows if the building, the little shape is wide enough. So to do that, and I'll just start here, I just take my threaded needle and I go through those marks and I make those little dashes here for the window. So again, I just try and keep them all evenly spaced, and I make the rows as parallel as I can. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's supposed to look handmade. But it is nice to have it somewhat in a row. It's a very geometric design. And again, it's very simple and enjoyable. So I'll continue stitching all the way around here and show you what it looks like, and then I'll show you some variations as well. So I finished stitching along here, and as you can see, I have my baseline, all my little windows, some doors, and everything. Now I have that green pen, that Frixion erasable pen, so I want to remove that ink. So I just take a hot iron and press over my design. And that removes the ink. I just have to be thorough and get all traces of that ink. So that's my cityscape. I wanted to show you just some variations using that same technique. You just make a different sketch, or you can incorporate color as well. So I have a little version here where I've made just a simple cityscape, just a few buildings. I have yellow for the little windows, and then I decided to add some greenery, some trees and little awnings on the doors. It's just a cute little element that I could add to my slow stitching, either the piece or the entire patch. And if you want it to be authentic, you can make a cityscape from a city. So here I took just some buildings that were familiar to me in Boston, and I stitched something that reminded me of them. It's not a perfect rendition, but it is a nice little element I can use on one of my fabric pages. I added a piece of ribbon here, kind of a little wily and wooded. Then I have my Boston skyline, and I even stitched in the name of the city. So that's how I create my cityscape. I showed you some variations, and you can take it to whatever level you want. It can be really involved and intricate with shrubbery and something in the sky, flags, these type of things. Or you can use it monochromatic in a single color. Each way, it's very effective, very different, but very effective in itself. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.